Hello, BookTube. Sorry for the no videos yesterday, and sorry for the shortness of the videos today. I'm feeling a little under the weather, so I'm going to make things brief. But I wanted to do the two read-alongs that I'm doing on this channel. And one of those is the Dune books of Frank Herbert. A couple of other booktubers and I are doing videos about the Dune books of Frank Herbert. We're ignoring the sequels that his son co-wrote and just talking about the original books. So we started off with Dune, of course, moved on to Dune Messiah, and then we did Children of Dune, which really does wrap up a kind of trilogy, all about Paul Atreides and his two children, Leto and Ganima, and the empire that they have wrested from the old imperial family. All built on the spice melange, a product that can only be found on the desert planet Dune, and that lengthens human life. It endows the Bene Gesserit Reverend Mothers with their superpowers. It allows the Spacing Guild to operate spaceships across vast interstellar distances, and the person who controls the spice controls all of that, and Paul Atreides takes control of that, and at the end of the third book, Children of Dune, the Empire is going to fall into the hands of Paul's children, Leto and Ganima, twins who were born with thousands and thousands of years of accumulated memories that they can access at will, which makes them superior and weird to begin with. But Leto takes the extra step in Children of Dune. On top of all that, that vast interior chorus of previous lives, the supersaturation of his body with the spice melange, the combination of all those things allows him to do something that no one has ever done before. The sandworms of Dune have a larval stage called sand trout, in which they're not, hundreds of feet long, but rather just an arm's length long. They live in the sand. They're playthings for children. And Leto invites them onto his skin, the sand trout, and they go and they layer, and they eventually cover almost every inch of his skin, and they start probing their cilia deep inside him and transforming him. They start transforming him. It happens relatively quickly. Just a little bit after he invites the sand trout over his skin, he is a different kind of being. He is physically superior, faster, infinitely stronger, able to wrest physical control of his surroundings, and also to take control of the Empire. And that is how we end Children of Dune, with Ganima entering into a marriage, and Leto entering into a sham marriage, and clearly taking control of the Empire. All of the lieutenants are in place, and the one impediment, Alia, the children's aunt, is dead and gone. And the clear path is that now that Leto is a kind of little Superman, we will follow him as he consolidates power in the Empire. And that doesn't happen. When we end Children of Dune and jump to God Emperor of Dune, the next book in the series, these are the new Ace paperbacks that will be in your bookstores. Very pretty, very nice things. When we jump to God Emperor of Dune, we realize right away that an enormous amount of time has passed. It's actually something that it's a coincidence that uniting both of my read-alongs this time around, because the other read-along is The Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever. And this month we're reading The Wounded Land, which is the first book in the second trilogy. And the gap of time between events in the end of the third book and the first book in the second trilogy is 4,000 years. The gap of time here is very close to that. It's 3,500 years. And in both cases, one character is spanning that time. Thomas Covenant has been alive this whole time. And in this case, it's Leto. The sand trout on his skin have not only made him a superior being, but they are transforming him. The sand trout are doing the only thing they know how. They are transforming him into a sandworm. And when this book begins, well over 3,000 years have passed, with him in complete control of the Empire, complete control of the spice, which has dwindled because Dune has changed. As you can see from this gorgeous cover, Dune has become a lush green world. There's only one desert left anywhere on the planet, where deserts used to cover every inch and where sandworms roamed. Now there's just one little desert that Leto carefully cultivates, and there is no spice except the spice that has been hoarded by the Bene Gesserit or by the Spacing Guild or by Leto himself, who sits atop a vast hoard of spice. And Leto is changed. He doesn't look human anymore. He has a human face and relatively human arms and hands, but his body is vast. It's the size of a whale shark, and his legs and feet have sort of atrophied. They are flippers, basically. He has a giant segmented body. He doesn't wear clothes or anything like that. It's a grotesque thing, as he himself says early in the book. And we get, in very quick, very accomplished brushstrokes, we get a portrait of what this new empire is like. Leto is the god of this empire, and he has an all-female army called the Fish Speakers that attend to him on the planet Arrakis, and that attend to his festivals, and who are fanatically devoted to him as a god. He is their religious figure. And in the chapters that we're reading today, we're reading about the first 150 pages. Today, we meet a handful of people. It's a very wise choice on Herbert's part. He knows perfectly well that he has to acquaint readers with a vast amount of change, and he has to do it quickly. So we get lots of exposition, and it's very carefully done. The Bene Gesserit have reports that they make to the chapter house, and that gives us a lot of information. The Duke Leto keeps secret journals that he dictates for posterity, and when a couple of those are stolen, those journals become the mechanism by which there can be exposition. There's quite a bit of it, and it's quite a bit of it is artfully done. We hear Leto's voice, and we hear all about his empire long before we meet him in these early chapters. And in these early chapters, another wise decision that Herbert makes is to keep the cast of characters small. There's Leto, of course, and he is he is an endeavor of the whole book to understand, or even come to understand. One of the most interesting portraits of immortality, or, functional immortality, a very long life, that I know of in science fiction. There's also Leto's faithful majordomo, Monio, who's a normal man, in fact, completely normal, because he doesn't take the spice melange, so he doesn't have the added lifespan or the sharpened senses or anything like that. And he is a key character. He is a functionary. He is a valet. He is a sounding board. He is the power in the empire. We're told that his face is known everywhere, second only to Leto's own, which is cowled by the sand trout. So we meet Monio. We also meet Siona, who's a young rebel. She thinks that the God Emperor is a worm, a tyrant, and she's Monio's daughter. She's also Atreides, like Monio, like Paul Atreides, like Leto himself. And she has elements that Leto prizes, and that since Leto's prescience, his ability to foresee the future, is vastly off the scale of anything that we've seen in earlier books, we can't really be sure what it is that he values in her. He tells Monio at one point, just a little bit after the chapters that we're reading today, that he values surprises enormously, the unexpected, and we get a strong sense that Siona is wrapped up in that she is a vortex of tanglements in Leto's prescience, and that she might be able to do things that he wouldn't predict. And another character that we meet in the small cast that we get at the beginning of this book is Duncan Idaho. People who read Dune will know Duncan Idaho was a swordsman, a cavalier in the service of the House Atreides, and who seems to die in Dune, protecting the escape of Paul and his mother from the evil Harkonnens in that book. It turns out in Dune Messiah and in Children of Dune that Duncan Idaho doesn't quite die. Someone saves his living cell tissues, and there's a fugitive, sort of a weird demimonde of a culture that dabbles in technology, even though it's forbidden, and that has the technology to grow essentially functioning clones of Duncan Idaho, perfect clones of Duncan Idaho. And horrifyingly, we learn in these early chapters that Leto, the God Emperor, is so fond of having Duncan Idaho with him that there have been a huge strand of them, just a parade of Duncan Idaho clones that have come to his court, served out a little time, and either died of natural causes or been killed by Leto when they inevitably become rebellious, when they inevitably become revolted by this thing that originally wins their loyalty. We actually see it happen. We see a new Duncan Idaho brought to court, and we see the scene where he meets Leto for the first time, and we see how it's done, where there's much preying on Duncan Idaho's old loyalty to the Atreides. And since Idaho is a clone, he has no idea that so much time has passed. To him, the Atreides, as we knew them in Dune, are an immediate memory. So preying on his memory, on his loyalty to that family works, at least temporarily, at least at the beginning. Duncan Idaho is a living anachronism, as characters point out over and over again in this book. He is meant to be the leader of Leto's guard, but he is far weaker and slower and less developed, less sharp than anyone in Leto's guard, even than Monio himself. There's a scene later on in the book where they actually have a physical confrontation, and it's the confrontation of a child against an adult. Duncan Idaho never even has a chance against this mild-mannered bureaucrat. And around that tight cast of characters, at least initially, a lot is going on. There are all kinds of intrigues. Leto is enforcing the Golden Path. He's enforcing Leto's peace on the whole of his empire. No credit, cash on the barrelhead, no institutional cruelty. All the cruelty is his. No one else gets to be that way. No want, no destitution, but no striving either. A complete, bland, perfect peace, enforced by his fish speakers, who are dispatched to trouble spots before the trouble happens, because Leto's powers of prescience are as absolute as it gets. That is the world that we are introduced to. That is the world that Monio is essentially running. And that is the world that Duncan Idaho is encountering for the first time. And I think it's fascinating. It gets more detailed as it goes along. The chapters that we're reading today are mostly, they're very good, but they're mostly designed to set this up for us. And even so, even though that is, I think, their main purpose, they still take some chances. And one of the biggest chances is with Leto himself, who is, we are accustomed, in the earlier Dune books, to a kind of incorruptible core of heroism in the Atreides. In the Atreides in the men that we're meeting, Duke Leto Atreides in Dune is the hero. He is a hero. He dies, but he is pure. Paul, he's a hero. He's pure. He seems a little less pure in Dune Messiah, but for ideological reasons, so it's almost like that doesn't count. And then in Children of Dune, we have Leto and Ghanima, who are sane and incorruptible and normal and pure, surrounded by their corrupted aunt, surrounded by their scheming grandmother. And in God Emperor of Dune, that all changes. Unless you count Monio, unless you count Siona, unless you count these 80th generation Atreides from 3,500 years ago, then the Atreides that we're dealing with here is Leto, the God Emperor, and he is, I would argue, not a salvageable character. We learn a lot about him in these early chapters, and none of it is good. None of it is good. He is forever justifying himself. He's forever self-pitying. And we learn that some of his, quite a bit of his rule over his empire is brutal. There's one character, a devoted member of his fish speaker guard, who he knows perfectly well. They have a horrifying scene together. He knows perfectly well the pureness of her devotion, of her religious faith in him. When she is standing in front of him, she is standing before God. And he mocks her. And he mocks her faith right there in front of her. And there's no other reason than that he's bored. He's constantly talking about how bored he is with the Duncans, with Duncan Idaho, with all these different Duncan Idahos. He's constantly reprimanding Monio for being boring and limited, and when he's not doing that, he's doing abominations. When we're told at one point that he had a group of dissenting historians who were trying to write, who wrote books that he thought were pompous, that he had them rendered unconscious and burned on a pile of their published works. And when later on, Leto is in the middle of one of his not infrequent perorations to Monio, and is going on and on about Torquemada burning people alive during the Spanish Inquisition, Monio actually says, well, you mean the way you burned those historians? And Leto is touchy about it. Asks him, are you questioning my decision? Those historians were unconscious when they were burned. Like, that makes a difference. That we get all throughout these early chapters, we get a lot of very subtle psychological portrait of a creature who is justifying being in complete tyrannical control of every aspect of human life for 3,500 years. It's a lot to take in at first, so I'm gonna wrap this up while I can still sit upright. But I want to know what you think of all of it, especially if you're reading it for the first time. What did you make of this early book and these early chapters? What did you make of the fact that this is a radically different thing? We are no longer dealing with court versus desert. We are no longer dealing with the ways of the Fremen or the adaptation to a wild place named Dune that is the master of the people who live there. Everything is different. We're dealing with one central character, and Dune is a forested showcase world. The Fremen exist only as museum mockeries of themselves. It's like we're dealing in a completely different fictional world than anything that we've seen before in the Dune books. So I'm curious to know what you make of it all, and are you enjoying it? It's one thing you'll notice, very dialogue heavy. I myself love that. I think that Herbert gets better at that as he goes along, and this is a superb example. But I want to know what you think. So I'm gonna wrap this up. We will be back next time. So there are no numbered chapters in Dune, but next time we will read to roughly page 300. I'm thinking of stopping at the year. Every edition will be different, but the place where I want to stop next time is starts with Hui Nori followed a young fish speaker guide down a wide ramp which spiraled into the depths of On. And that is a little taste of a character that we have not met. One of the crucial characters in this book we do not meet in the chapters that we're reading today, and that character is named Hui Nori. We'll meet her next time, and there's a lot to talk about with her. So I'm gonna wrap this up for now. But I'll be back next week with the next installment of God Emperor, and hopefully a longer video, more detail. So I will wrap this up. But I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.